My beloved child, do not rush past this moment. There is a reason your eyes found these words today. You could have been anywhere else. You could have been doing something entirely different. Yet somehow, through all the noise, all the distractions, all the countless paths your day could have taken, you arrived here. Pause for a moment. Not because I demand your attention. Because something has been moving quietly behind the curtain of your life, and what you are about to hear carries the weight of a prayer that did not go unnoticed. For a long time, you believed that certain things were happening randomly. You believed some people entered your life by accident. You believed some delays had no meaning. You believed some doors closed simply because they were meant to close. But what if there was more to the story? What if the moments that confused you the most were actually connected by an invisible thread? What if every unanswered question has been leading toward a revelation that is only now beginning to unfold? Listen carefully, because there is someone you have not fully seen, someone whose heart has carried your name longer than you realize, someone whose prayers have traveled farther than you can imagine, and heaven has been listening. Not for a day, not for a week, not for a month, for far longer than you know. While you worried about your future, prayers were being spoken. While you questioned your worth, prayers were being spoken. While you wondered whether anyone truly understood the depths of your heart, prayers were being spoken. You never heard those prayers. You never saw the tears attached to them. You never witnessed the quiet moments when someone looked toward heaven and whispered requests they could barely put into words. Yet every word was heard. Every hope was noticed. Every longing was recorded. There were nights when they sat alone. Nights when the world was asleep. Nights when silence became the only companion in the room. And during those moments, something remarkable happened. Instead of asking for riches, instead of asking for status, instead of asking for recognition, they prayed for you, not because they knew everything about you, not because they had all the answers, but because something inside their spirit kept pointing toward a future they could not fully explain, a future connected to you. At first, they ignored the feeling. They dismissed it. They told themselves it was imagination. They convinced themselves it was only wishful thinking. Yet the feeling never left. It returned again, and again, and again, like a distant melody carried by the wind, like a whisper that refused to disappear. And every time they tried to move away from it, the pull became stronger. My beloved child, there are moments when heaven plants awareness inside a person's heart long before understanding arrives. This was one of those moments. They could not explain why they cared. They could not explain why they felt drawn toward someone they had not yet fully encountered. They could not explain why your happiness mattered to them. Yet it did, more than they understood, more than they could admit. And so they prayed, not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly, for your healing, for your peace, for your protection, for your future. For the unseen battles they somehow sensed you were fighting. There were times they prayed while smiling. There were times they prayed while crying. There were times they prayed while doubting. And there were times they prayed even when they thought nobody was listening. But someone was listening. Every single time. That is what changes everything. Because heaven does not measure prayers the way humans do. Humans measure by volume, by performance, by appearance, by eloquence. But heaven listens differently. The smallest whisper can shake eternity. The quietest tear can become a declaration. The simplest prayer can move forces you cannot see. And something began moving. Slowly at first. Almost invisibly. Pieces started shifting. Paths started changing. Timelines started rearranging. People entered and exited your life for reasons you did not understand. Unexpected delays appeared. Unexpected opportunities appeared. Strange moments of intuition appeared. You thought these events were unrelated. They were not. They were part of a preparation neither of you could fully see, because before certain blessings arrive, hearts must be shaped to receive them. That process is rarely comfortable. It often feels confusing. Sometimes it feels unfair. Sometimes it feels lonely. But preparation is not punishment. Preparation is evidence that something valuable is being protected. There were seasons when you felt forgotten. Seasons when answers seemed distant. Seasons when doors remained shut no matter how hard you knocked. Yet during those very seasons, hidden work continued. Work beyond your vision. Work beyond your understanding. Work beyond your timing. And now something is changing. Can you feel it? Not with your eyes. Not with your logic. With your spirit. The atmosphere around your story is changing. The chapter is changing. The momentum is changing. Because the prayers spoken over you have reached a moment of response. Not the response people expect. Not some dramatic event falling from the sky. Something deeper. Something more meaningful. A chain of events has already begun. Even now. Even while these words reach your ears. Even while doubts attempt to interrupt your faith. The answer has started moving. And here is what makes this extraordinary. The answer is not only about them. It is also about you. Because while they were praying for your future, heaven was preparing theirs. While they asked for your protection, heaven was teaching them patience. While they asked for your happiness, heaven was teaching them trust. Without realizing it, both journeys became connected. Two separate roads. Two separate stories. Two separate lives. Being guided toward an intersection neither could yet see. That intersection has a purpose. A reason. A meaning greater than coincidence. But before that purpose can fully emerge, something must first be revealed. There is a truth hidden beneath everything. A truth neither of you completely understands yet. A truth that explains why certain people could not stay. Why certain opportunities disappeared. Why certain plans failed despite your best efforts. Because not every path leads where heaven intends. Not every connection is meant to remain. Not every door deserves to open. Some things leave because something greater is approaching. And something greater is approaching. Closer than you think. Closer than yesterday. Closer than last month. Closer than the moment you first started wondering whether your story would ever change. Do not mistake silence for absence. Do not mistake waiting for rejection. Do not mistake delay for denial. The prayer has been heard. The answer has begun. And there is something else you need to know. Something they never expected. Something that startled even them. Recently, they felt a shift. A subtle change. An unexplainable certainty. The kind that arrives without evidence. The kind that appears before confirmation. The kind that makes a person stop in the middle of an ordinary day and suddenly feel that something important is near. They could not explain it. They tried. But logic could not reach it. Reason could not define it. Words could not contain it. All they knew was this. The prayer no longer felt distant. It felt close. As though heaven had moved from listening to acting. And that realization changed everything. Because once a heart senses movement, hope awakens. Once hope awakens, expectation follows. Once expectation follows, faith grows stronger. And faith has been growing. Not perfectly. Not without struggles. But steadily. Quietly. Powerfully. Yet there is one detail they still do not know. One detail that remains hidden. One detail connected directly to you. A revelation so significant that when it becomes visible, many things that seemed random will suddenly make sense. Moments from years ago. Conversations you forgot. Decisions that felt insignificant. Detours you regretted. All of them are connected to a pattern. A pattern that is only beginning to reveal itself. And the closer this revelation comes, the stronger the signs become. That is why your spirit has been feeling different lately. That is why certain thoughts keep returning. That is why some old emotions are resurfacing. This is not happening without reason. Something is preparing to come into the light. Something that has remained hidden long enough. And when that moment arrives, neither of you will ever see your journey the same way again. Because the prayer was never only about finding someone. It was about becoming who you were meant to be. It was about transformation. It was about alignment. It was about preparing two hearts for a truth larger than either one imagined. But there is still one final piece missing. One final piece that heaven has not yet revealed. And that missing piece is closer than anyone realizes. Closer than they realize. Closer than you realize. In fact, the first sign has already appeared. Neither of you recognized it when it happened. Yet it changed the direction of everything. And in the next part, that hidden sign, and the astonishing reason your soulmate's prayer was answered at this exact moment, will finally begin to be revealed. The moment that sign appeared, nothing looked different on the surface. The sky did not change. The world did not stop. No dramatic announcement echoed across the heavens. Everything seemed ordinary. And that is precisely why neither of you recognized it. Some of heaven's most important movements arrive quietly. They slip into ordinary moments disguised as coincidence. They hide inside routine days. They appear during conversations that seem insignificant. They arrive while people are distracted by everything else. Yet behind those simple moments, entire destinies begin to shift. That is exactly what happened. The first sign was not loud. It was subtle. So subtle that you almost dismissed it. A strange feeling. An unexpected thought. A moment of remembering someone without knowing why. A sudden sense that something was changing even though you had no evidence. You tried to explain it away. You told yourself it meant nothing. You pushed it aside and continued with your day. But the feeling returned. Again. And again. And again. Not because your imagination was creating it. Because your spirit was sensing movement before your eyes could see it. My beloved child, there are moments when heaven allows the heart to notice things long before the mind understands them. This was one of those moments. While you were trying to make sense of your life, something extraordinary was unfolding in another place. Your soulmate was experiencing their own signs. Different circumstances, but the same message, the same quiet certainty, the same growing awareness that something significant was approaching. At first they resisted it, not because they lacked faith, because they feared disappointment. They had hoped before, they had waited before, they had believed before, and like many people, they carried memories of expectations that never became reality. So when this feeling appeared, they tried to ignore it. They focused on other things. They buried themselves in responsibilities. They distracted themselves with daily life. But the feeling would not leave. Every time they pushed it away, it returned stronger. Every time they dismissed it, another sign appeared. Every time they questioned it, another moment of confirmation arrived. Slowly, their resistance began to weaken. And something beautiful started happening. Their prayers changed. Before, they had prayed from longing. Now they prayed from expectation. Before, they asked whether it was possible. Now they asked whether it was close. Before, they wondered if heaven had heard them. Now they wondered what heaven was preparing. That shift may seem small, but it changes everything. Because expectation opens doors that fear keeps closed. Expectation creates room for miracles. Expectation allows hope to breathe. And hope had begun breathing again. Yet neither of you understood the full picture. Not even close. Because behind the scenes, a much larger story was unfolding. A story that began long before either of you noticed. Long before the recent signs. long before the recent feelings, long before the recent prayers. Years ago, events were set into motion, tiny events, moments that seemed forgettable, choices that appeared insignificant, encounters that lasted only minutes, yet each one played a role. Every step mattered, every delay mattered, every detour mattered, every disappointment mattered. You thought some chapters of your life were wasted. You thought some seasons had no purpose. You thought some struggles accomplished nothing. But heaven wastes nothing. Not one tear, not one lesson, not one setback, not one moment of growth. Everything was being woven together, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, because pain often teaches what comfort never can. Pain reveals strength. Pain creates wisdom. Pain develops compassion. Pain reshapes priorities. And the person you are becoming today could not exist without the journey you survived yesterday. That truth applies to your soulmate as well. They were not ready years ago. You were not ready years ago. Neither of you could have carried what is coming. Not because you lacked value. Because you were still becoming. There were lessons they needed. There were lessons you needed. There were wounds that required healing. There were fears that required confronting. There were beliefs that required changing. And heaven patiently allowed that process to unfold. Not rushing, not forcing, not abandoning, guiding, quietly guiding. That guidance became especially important during a season neither of you fully understood. A season when everything seemed uncertain. A season when doors closed unexpectedly. A season when hopes appeared delayed. Looking back, it felt frustrating. But from heaven's perspective, it was protection. Because some opportunities would have taken you away from your purpose. Some relationships would have distracted you from your growth. Some paths would have led you further from the answer to those prayers. So the doors remained closed, not forever, just long enough for something better to develop, long enough for something greater to approach, long enough for two separate journeys to move closer to alignment. That alignment is happening now. Can you feel it? There is a difference between waiting and approaching. Many people cannot tell the difference, but spiritually, they are not the same. Waiting feels still. Approaching carries momentum. Waiting feels distant. Approaching feels alive. And something is approaching. Every day, the distance grows smaller. Every day, the connection becomes stronger. Every day, invisible pieces move into place. That is why the signs have become more frequent. That is why your spirit keeps paying attention. That is why certain messages seem to find you repeatedly. That is why certain thoughts refuse to disappear. The closer a promise comes, the louder the echoes become. Not through fear, not through pressure, through awareness. Awareness that something important is drawing near. Your soulmate has been noticing this too, more than you realize. In recent days, moments have occurred that they cannot explain. Moments when your energy seemed close. Moments when memories appeared unexpectedly. Moments when they felt an overwhelming sense of peace without understanding why. Moments when they suddenly stopped whatever they were doing and simply sat in silence. Listening, feeling, wondering. Not because they had answers. Because something inside them knew answers were coming. And during one of those moments, something remarkable happened. A prayer emerged unlike any prayer they had spoken before. Not a prayer asking for signs. Not a prayer asking for proof. Not a prayer asking for timing. A prayer of surrender. A prayer that said, "If this is truly from heaven, I trust you." Those words changed everything. Because surrender creates space for miracles that control cannot. When a person releases fear, faith gains room to grow. When a person releases pressure, peace gains room to enter. When a person releases constant striving, heaven can move in ways they never expected. And after that prayer, the atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, quietly, powerfully. A new peace entered their heart. A peace they could not explain. A peace that remained even when questions remained unanswered. A peace that whispered, "Something is happening." That whisper was true, because at that very moment, another piece of the story moved into position. A piece connected directly to you. A piece you still know nothing about. Yet its influence has already begun. You may have noticed subtle changes recently. A renewed sense of hope. A strange feeling that the future holds more than you previously believed. An awareness that your story is not finished. These feelings are not appearing by accident. They are connected. More connected than you realize. The prayer, the signs, the timing, the alignment. All of it points toward the same destination. Yet there remains one final barrier, one final veil, one final hidden truth that neither of you can fully see, for now, because heaven often reveals answers in stages, not to create confusion, to create understanding. If every answer arrived at once, the lesson would be lost. If every mystery disappeared immediately, growth would stop. So revelation unfolds layer by layer, step by step, moment by moment, and the next layer is closer than ever, closer than either of you suspects. In fact, something has already started unfolding around your soulmate, something they have not spoken about, something they have kept entirely to themselves. A moment, a realization, a discovery. At first, they dismissed it. Then they questioned it. Then they became deeply curious about it, because the more they thought about it, the less it felt like coincidence, and the more it felt like an answer. Not a complete answer, just the beginning of one. The first glimpse of a truth they have been praying to understand. That realization has been growing stronger every day. And soon, it will become impossible to ignore. When that happens, another major piece of the story will finally emerge from the shadows. A piece connected to why heaven answered those prayers now instead of years ago. A piece connected to what was being prepared during all those seasons of waiting. A piece connected to a hidden event neither of you fully recognized when it happened. That event seemed ordinary, almost forgettable. Yet it became one of the most important moments in this entire journey. And when its true meaning is finally revealed, the connection between your path and your soulmate's path will become clearer than ever before. Because that moment was not random. It was not accidental. It was not insignificant. It was the beginning of something that heaven had been arranging for much longer than either of you could imagine. And the astonishing truth behind that hidden moment is finally about to come into the light. There is a reason that hidden moment refuses to stay buried. A reason it keeps moving beneath the surface of this story like a current beneath still water. Because what seemed ordinary was never ordinary. What seemed small was never small. And what seemed forgettable became one of the most important turning points in the journey heaven was weaving together. Neither of you recognized it when it happened. You were focused on other things. Your soulmate was focused on other things. Life was moving quickly. Responsibilities demanded attention. Questions demanded answers. The future felt uncertain. And yet, right in the middle of that ordinary season, something invisible shifted. Not around you, within you. That is where heaven often begins. Not with circumstances, with hearts. Not with announcements, with transformation. Not with visible signs, with invisible preparation. My beloved child, many people spend their lives looking for dramatic proof while missing the sacred work happening inside them. They wait for mountains to move. Meanwhile, heaven is strengthening them to climb. They wait for immediate answers. Meanwhile, heaven is building the wisdom needed to understand those answers. And that is exactly what was happening. You were changing. Your soulmate was changing. Neither of you fully understood it. Neither of you could measure it. Yet the growth was real. Every challenge shaped something. Every disappointment taught something. Every delay revealed something. The process was creating versions of yourselves capable of carrying a future that once would have overwhelmed you. That future is closer now than it has ever been. And that is why the atmosphere feels different. That is why certain old fears no longer hold the same power. That is why some doors that once seemed impossible suddenly appear reachable. Because spiritual seasons change. Just as winter eventually gives way to spring, seasons of preparation eventually give way to seasons of revelation. And revelation is beginning. Slowly, carefully, but undeniably. Your soulmate has sensed it more strongly than ever. In recent days, they have found themselves revisiting memories. Not because they wanted to, because those memories keep appearing. Moments they had not thought about for months. Conversations they believed they had forgotten. Feelings they assumed had disappeared. Suddenly, they returned. At first it felt random. Then it felt intentional. Then it felt impossible to ignore. Each memory carried something unusual. A thread. A pattern. A connection. The more they reflected, the more they realized that certain events in their life seemed to point in the same direction. Not perfectly, not obviously, but consistently, almost as though someone had been quietly arranging pieces long before they understood what picture those pieces belonged to. That realization brought both excitement and humility. Excitement because hope began rising again. Humility because they realized how little they actually knew about the larger plan. And that realization changed the way they prayed. Once again, their prayers evolved. Instead of asking, "When will this happen?" they began asking, "What am I supposed to learn before it does?" Instead of asking, "Why has it taken so long?" they began asking, "How have I grown because of the wait?" Instead of focusing only on the destination, they started recognizing the beauty hidden within the journey. That shift was powerful. Because gratitude opens doors frustration cannot. Trust opens doors anxiety cannot. And their trust has been growing. Not perfectly, but steadily. Every day, every prayer, every quiet moment, every unexpected sign. Yet there is something they still do not know. Something heaven has kept hidden for a reason. A truth connected directly to you. Not the version of you the world sees. The deeper version. The person you are becoming. The person shaped by experiences nobody else fully understands. The person who continued moving forward despite setbacks. The person who kept believing even when evidence seemed scarce. The person who survived seasons that should have broken them. That version of you matters more than you realize. Because that is the version heaven has been preparing. Not the fearful version. Not the doubtful version. Not the wounded version that once believed the story was over. The stronger version. The wiser version. The healed version. And something extraordinary is beginning to happen. The distance between who you were and who you are becoming is shrinking. You are stepping into a new chapter. A chapter that could not begin until the previous one had fully completed its work. That completion is happening now. Can you feel it? Some endings arrive quietly. No announcement. No warning. No dramatic conclusion. One day you simply realize that an old season no longer has authority over you. The pain no longer controls you. The fear no longer controls you. The uncertainty no longer controls you. You are different. And because you are different, your future can become different too. Your soulmate has been experiencing a similar awakening, though they do not yet realize how closely your journeys mirror one another. The same lessons, the same growth, the same preparation, different details, different circumstances, but remarkably similar transformations. That similarity is not accidental. It is part of the design. Because certain connections require both hearts to grow before they can fully recognize what heaven is doing. And recognition is coming, closer than ever. There was a recent moment that your soulmate has not told anyone about. A moment that seemed small at first, yet it left a lasting impression. They were going about an ordinary day. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just another day like countless others. Then suddenly, a thought entered their mind. Not a forced thought, not something they deliberately created. It simply appeared, clear, unexpected, persistent. The thought carried a feeling unlike anything they had experienced before. Not excitement, not fear, certainty, a quiet certainty. The kind that arrives without explanation. The kind that settles deep inside the soul. The kind that makes a person stop and wonder whether they have just encountered something sacred. They tried to ignore it. The thought remained. They distracted themselves. The feeling remained. They questioned it. The certainty remained. And eventually they realized something. The prayer no longer felt like a distant hope. It felt connected to reality, not future reality, present reality, as though the answer was already moving, already unfolding, already approaching. That realization has stayed with them. Day after day, growing stronger, becoming harder to dismiss. And every time it grows stronger, another piece of the puzzle seems to appear. Another confirmation, another moment. Another unexpected sign. Heaven often works this way, rarely through one overwhelming event, more often through a series of moments that gradually become impossible to deny. One sign may be questioned, 2 signs may be dismissed, 3 signs may be explained away, but eventually the pattern becomes undeniable. That pattern is forming now, both around you and around them. And here is what makes this even more remarkable. The pattern is accelerating. What once took months now seems to happen in weeks. What once took weeks now seems to happen in days. Momentum is building. Movement is increasing. The story is advancing. Yet the most astonishing part has not been revealed. Not yet. Because hidden beneath everything is a secret your soulmate has unknowingly carried for a very long time. A secret connected to their prayers. A secret connected to their future. A secret connected to why they felt drawn towards something they could never fully explain. For years, they believed those feelings were simply emotions. They believed those moments were simply thoughts. They believed those longings were simply hopes. But they were mistaken. Those feelings were connected to something much deeper. Something that began long before they understood it. And the first glimpse of that deeper truth is beginning to emerge. Very slowly, very carefully, piece by piece. Just enough to capture attention. Just enough to awaken curiosity. Just enough to reveal that the story is larger than either of you imagined. Because the prayer your soulmate offered was never only about finding love. It was never only about companionship. It was never only about a future relationship. It was about purpose. It was about destiny. It was about becoming part of something heaven had been arranging far beyond their understanding. And recently, they have started sensing that. Not fully, just enough. Enough to know there is more. Enough to know the story is unfinished. Enough to know the answer they have been waiting for may be much closer than they once believed. But there is still one revelation hidden in the shadows. One revelation so unexpected that when it finally comes into the light, it will change the way they understand every prayer they have ever spoken. A revelation connected to a promise. A promise they unknowingly made long ago. A promise heaven never forgot. And the moment that promise begins revealing itself, everything will start making sense in ways neither of you could have imagined. That moment is approaching now, closer than yesterday, closer than last week, closer than ever before. And when it arrives, The true reason heaven answered those prayers at this exact time will finally begin to unfold.